If the one fragile thing in your life was about to break and yet could still save you, like the cracked beam above Sarah's head, would you walk away or rebuild your entire life from that splintered piece of wood? The morning had started with the usual coffee grounds, stretched thin, oatmeal portioned careful. Beth and the twins, Tommy and Sam, scraping their bowls clean while Sarah calculated. Flour to last 2 weeks. Salt pork for 10 days. The soddy's roof sagged worse each time the wind picked up, and the wind never seemed to quit. Tommy, take your brother to check the snares. She folded the marriage paper, creased soft from handling back into her apron. Beth, help me with the washing. The children scattered like quail, quick and quiet. Good children. They'd learn not to waste words when Mama had that look, the one that meant counting pennies and watching clouds. Sarah carried the wash basin outside, water sloshing cold against her wrists. The roof beam groaned overhead, that singing sound Beth had learned to notice. A year since James died of the fever, and every storm since had tested the soddy's bones. She'd patched what she could with sod and prayer, but the main support beam split down its center would give before summer's end. Mama? Beth appeared at her elbow, arms full of damp clothes. Why don't we write to Uncle Charles? Sarah's hands stilled in the wash water. Uncle Charles, who'd written twice offering to take the children back to Ohio, away from this hard place. Away from her. We manage fine. The words came automatic. But the roof holds. Beth bit her lip, hung a small dress on the line. Smart girl. Too smart, maybe, for a place where smart didn't always mean safe. The church bell struck 11, carried on wind that tasted of ice. Sarah looked northwest and saw the line of clouds building, dark as a bruise. Spring storm coming, the kind that dropped temperatures 40 degrees in an hour and piled snow deep enough to bury a horse. She touched the hat box beside the door brass corners bright against weathered wood. Inside, 3 letters to Uncle Charles, each one started and abandoned. Each one a small surrender she couldn't quite make. The roof beam sang again, higher now. Tommy and Sam came running from the creek, empty-handed but breathless with news. Mama! Rider coming! Big man on a brown horse! Sarah shaded her eyes, followed their pointing fingers to the hill crest. A figure materialized against the grey sky, broad shoulders, steady seat, leading a pack horse loaded with something that caught the weak sunlight. Lumber. The stranger crested the hill proper, and Sarah saw him clear, weathered face under a square set hat, coat hanging open despite the cold bite. His pack horse carried fresh-cut beams, the kind that cost real money in a place where trees grew scarce. He reined in at her gate, if the gap in the low stone wall could be called a gate, and touched his hat brim. Ma'am. Name's Jacob Thorne. Heard tell you might need a hand with that roof. Sarah's fingers found the marriage paper in her apron, the soft fold of it familiar as her own heartbeat. Heard from who? Pastor Whitley. Said there was a woman with 3 young ones and a roof that needed fixing before the weather turned. The clouds pressed closer, and the wind carried the scent of snow. Sarah looked at her children, Beth trying to look grown-up at 10, the twins wide-eyed at 8, and felt the weight of choice settling on her shoulders like lead. I can't pay much. Jacob Thorne dismounted, tied his horses to the fence post. Didn't ask for much. He walked to his pack horse, untied a long beam solid oak, straight-grained, the kind of timber that would hold against any storm. Shouldered it easy, as a man might shoulder a rifle. Where you want this? By noon, the work had found its rhythm. Jacob Thorne moved with the sure economy of a man who'd built things before measuring twice, cutting once, every motion deliberate. The children watched from the doorway, Beth keeping the twins quiet with hand games and whispered stories. Sarah worked beside him when she could, holding boards steady while he hammered, passing him nails from the leather pouch at his belt. They didn't talk much, just the necessary words about angles and measurements, but she found herself stealing glances at his hands. Scarred but steady, wedding ring gone pale on the finger where it used to sit. Storm's moving faster than I figured, he said around 1 o'clock, pausing to wipe sweat from his forehead. The temperature had dropped 10 degrees in the last hour, and the wind now carried the sharp promise of snow. Sarah followed his gaze to the northwest. The cloud wall stretched dark across the horizon. maybe 2 hours out. Will we have time? For the main beam, yes. Rest of it. He shrugged, reached for another board. We'll see what we see. The hat box sat beside the door where Sarah had left it, brass corners winking in the grey light. 3 times she'd caught herself looking at it, thinking of the letters inside. Dear Charles, the children are well, but the winters here are hard. Dear Charles, I don't know if I can manage another season. Dear Charles, maybe you were right about Ohio. Mama? Tommy appeared at her elbow, tugging on her skirt. The man's horse is limping. Sarah looked across the yard to where Jacob's brown gelding stood, favoring its left front foot. Jacob followed her gaze, set down his hammer with a soft curse. Stone bruise, looks like. He walked over, ran his hand down the horse's leg. Won't be going anywhere fast today. The wind picked up, rattling the loose boards on the old roof. Sarah felt that familiar tightness in her chest, the feeling of walls closing in, choices narrowing down to the ones you didn't want to make. There's room in the lean-to, she heard herself say. For your horses. Jacob straightened, studied her face. Storms likely to blow through by morning. Likely. He nodded once, led his horses toward the small shelter attached to the soddy's east side. Sarah watched him go, the marriage paper in her apron pocket, seeming to pulse with its own weight. Beth came to stand beside her, small hands slipping into hers. He's nice, Mama. He's a stranger. So were we. Once. Before Daddy brought us here. Sarah squeezed her daughter's fingers, remembering. James had been full of plans then. Good land, cheap, room to grow, a place where a man could build something lasting. The fever had taken him before the first hard winter, leaving her with 3 children and a dream that felt too big for one woman to carry alone. The first snowflakes began to fall, fat and slow, dusting the new lumber with white. Jacob returned from settling his horses, picked up his hammer again. Best get this beam in place while we can still see what we're doing. They worked in the gathering dusk. The snow falling heavier now, obscuring the hills and turning the familiar landscape strange. The old roof beam came out in pieces, rotten clear through, barely holding together with hope and habit. The new beam slid into place, smooth as butter, solid oak that would hold against anything the prairie could throw at it. That'll do, Jacob said, stepping back to admire the work. Snow dusted his shoulders, clung to his hat brim. Rest can wait for better weather. Sarah nodded, suddenly aware of how the day had shifted around them. A stranger had become a guest. A roof had become sound again. The storm that had threatened now felt almost like shelter, holding them all in this small circle of lamplight and warmth. I'll put coffee on, she said. Inside the soddy, lamplight pushed back the gathering darkness. Jacob sat at the rough table while Sarah worked at the stove, conscious of his presence in her small space, how it changed the rhythm of ordinary things. The children had settled on their rope bed, Beth reading aloud from the Bible while the twins drowsed against her shoulders. Story of Ruth, Beth read, her voice clear in the warm air, and Ruth said, Entreat me not to leave thee, or to return from following after thee. For whither thou goest, I will go. Sarah poured coffee into 2 tin cups, set one before Jacob. Their fingers brushed as he took it, and she felt something in her chest flutter and settle, like a bird finding a branch. Lost my wife 2 years back, he said quietly, not looking at her. Influenza. Happened fast. Sarah sat across from him, wrapped her hands around her own cup for warmth. The fever took James. Left me with. She gestured toward the children, the soddy. The weight of it all. Hard thing. Raising them alone. Loneliness is its own kind of labor. The words hung between them, honest and simple. Outside, the wind howled and snow pattered against the single window, but inside felt safe now, solid in a way it hadn't for months. Jacob reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a small wooden carving a horse, smooth and detailed, mane flowing like it was caught in mid-gallop. Made this for my boy before he passed. Scarlet fever 3 years ago. Thought maybe. He looked toward the twins. Thought one of them might like it. Sarah took the carving, felt its smooth weight in her palm. Such careful work, each muscle of the horse defined, the eyes alert and kind. A gift made with love, offered now to strangers who weren't quite strangers anymore. "Tommy," she called softly, "come see what Mr. Thorne has for you." The boy approached, shy but curious, eyes going wide when he saw the carved horse. "For me? For you and your brother to share," Jacob said. "Take turns being fair about it." Tommy clutched the horse to his chest, grinned gap-toothed and bright. "Sam, look what the man made." The twins examined the carving with reverent fingers, while Beth looked on, trying to hide her own longing. Jacob caught her expression, winked. "Got something for you too, miss. Tomorrow, when the storm passes." Beth flushed pink, ducked her head with pleasure. Sarah felt her heart do something dangerous, open like a door she'd kept locked since James died. This man who'd appeared on her hill like an answer to a prayer she hadn't known she was praying, who fixed roofs and carved toys and sat at her table like he belonged there. The hat box caught the lamplight from its place beside the door, brass corners gleaming. Inside, 3 letters she'd never sent, 3 different versions of giving up. She stood, walked over, lifted the lid. The letters lay folded neat and small, Uncle Charles's address written careful on each one. "Dear Charles, I can't manage. Dear Charles, take the children. Dear Charles, I was never cut out for this life." "What's that, Mama?" Beth asked. Sarah looked at her daughter, 10 years old and steady as a rock, reading Bible stories to her brothers, helping with washing and cooking and all the 100 small tasks that kept them going. Looked at the twins, 8 years old and still believing the world was mostly good, that grown-ups could fix anything that broke. Looked at Jacob Thorne, who'd shouldered her burdens without being asked, who sat at her table like he'd always belonged there. "Just some old papers," she said, and fed the letters to the fire one by one. The flames ate them quick and clean, turning surrender into smoke and ash. Outside, the storm howled and the snow piled deep. Inside, the new roof beam held steady and strong, and the lamplight made everything seem possible again. Dawn came grey and muffled, the world outside transformed. Snow had drifted halfway up the window, and the wind still blew fierce from the northwest. Sarah woke to the sound of Jacob already moving in the main room, stirring up the fire, putting coffee on. "Storm's not done yet," he said when she emerged from the small back room where she slept. "Maybe another day, judging by the look of it." Through the window, she could see nothing but white, the familiar landmarks erased, the world reduced to this small, warm space. The children still slept, bundled together like puppies under their shared quilt. "I hope your horse," she began. "He'll be fine. Storm like this, best thing is to wait it out." Jacob poured coffee, handed her a cup. "Question is, you got enough supplies to feed an extra mouth for a few days?" Sarah did quick calculations: flour, salt pork, beans, the small store of preserves she'd put up last fall. "Tight, but manageable. We'll make do. Don't want to be a burden." The word hung between them, sharp with meaning. The question struck like a hammer on thin glass what she'd been to James, maybe dragging him out to this hard place. What she was to Uncle Charles, the sister-in-law with too many children and not enough sense to know when she was beaten. What the children might become if she couldn't hold things together. "You're not," she said firmly. The morning passed quiet, all of them trapped inside by the howling wind. Jacob whittled first, a small doll for Beth, then a whistle for Sam. The children watched his hands with fascination, learning patience from his steady movements. "How'd you learn to carve like that?" Beth asked. "My father taught me." His father before that. Family trade, you might say. "What kind of family trade?" Jacob smiled, shaved another curl from the doll's wooden face. "Coffin makers." Sarah looked up from the mending in her lap. "That's a useful skill out here." "Useful anywhere. People die everywhere. Need something decent to lay them in." He tested the doll's arm joint, nodded approval. "But I got tired of making boxes for the dead. Started making other things, furniture, toys, whatever folks needed." "Is that why you travel?" "Travel for work, mostly. Pick up jobs where I find them." He held up the finished doll, simple but beautifully made, with a sweet carved face and movable arms. "Sometimes find more than work." Beth took the doll with reverent hands, cradled it like something precious. She's beautiful. What should I name her? That's for you to decide. Hope, Beth said after a moment. I'll call her Hope. The afternoon brought a lull in the storm, the wind dropping to a steady moan. Jacob pulled on his coat, fought his way through the drifts to check on the horses. When he returned, stamping snow from his boots, his expression was grim. Feed's running low, he said quietly to Sarah. Your milk cow's looking poorly, too. Storm keeps up much longer. Sarah felt the familiar, her stomach hollowed with dread. Always something, some new crisis waiting to tip the careful balance she fought so hard to maintain. How long can they last? Few more days, maybe. Depends on how hard the wind blows. She nodded, mind already working the problem. The cow was their lifeline, milk for the children, butter to trade in town. If they lost her, there's hay in the loft, she said. Not much, but some. I'll stretch it far as I can. The wind picked up again as evening fell, rattling the soddy's walls and sending snow devils dancing across the drifts. Sarah made supper, beans and cornbread, stretched thin but filling. The children ate without complaint, sensing the tension in the adults' quiet talk. After they'd settled the children for sleep, Sarah and Jacob sat by the fire, listening to the storm's voice. The hatbox sat empty beside the door, its brass corners dim now in the low light. You burned some papers last night, Jacob said. Sarah stared into the flames. Letters I never sent. To who? My brother-in-law, in Ohio. She turned her cup in her hands, watching the coffee swirl. He wants to take the children. Says I can't manage alone. Can you? The question cut clean and sharp. Sarah felt the weight of it all the morning she'd woken, wondering if today would be the day something broke that couldn't be fixed. The roof, the cow, her own stubborn heart. I don't know, she said. Some days I think he's right. Some days I think I'm just being proud, keeping them here when they'd be better off. Better off how? In some city, working in factories, never seeing sky bigger than a brick wall, safe, fed regular. With family. You're their family. Sarah met his eyes, saw something there that made her chest tight with possibility. James brought us here because he believed in something, building something. I burned those letters because she stopped, searching for words. Because giving up on his dream felt like giving up on him. The storm howled outside, but the roof held steady. The new beam Jacob had installed sang a different song now, not the weak complaint of failing wood, but the deep note of something built to last. Storm'll break tomorrow, Jacob said. Always does. Eventually. And then he looked at her across the small table, lamplight catching the silver in his beard. Then we see what needs doing next. The storm broke near midnight, wind falling away to nothing so suddenly that Sarah woke from the silence. She lay in her narrow bed, listening to the profound quiet that follows a prairie blizzard, no sound but the settling of snow and the soft breathing of her sleeping children. When dawn came, it was brilliant sun striking off drifted snow, so bright it hurt to look at. Jacob was already outside, digging paths to the lean-to and the necessary. The children pressed against the window, marveling at the transformed world. It's like fairyland, Beth breathed. Pretty as pictures, Sam agreed. But Sarah saw past the beauty to the practical concerns, snow piled 4 feet deep against the door, the paths to the well and outbuildings buried, the cow lowing with distress from the lean-to, work to be done, and the morning already half gone. Come on, she told the children. Everyone helps. They spent the day digging out, the adults working steady while the children did what they could. By afternoon they had paths cleared and the animals tended, but Sarah could see the cost. The cow was thin, shivering despite the shelter, and Jacob's horses looked hollow-flanked. Need to get to town, Jacob said, examining his mount's stone bruise. Horses sound enough to travel, but barely. Sarah nodded, did her own calculations. Flour nearly gone, the last of the salt pork used up yesterday. They needed supplies, and soon. I'll come with you. Better if I go alone. Faster that way. This is my family. My responsibility. Jacob looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. We'll take the children to the Andersons' place. Safe there. And Mary Anderson will be glad of the company. They set out the next morning, the children bundled warm for the ride to the neighbor's homestead 3 miles east. The world was a dazzle of white and blue, snow crunching under the horses' hooves, breath steaming in the crystal air. At the Andersons' place, Mary fussed over the children, insisted they stay for dinner, pressed packages of food into Sarah's hands. Storm like that, folks need to help each other. We'll be back by evening, Sarah promised Beth, who clung tight around her waist. I know, Mama. You always come back. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow, such faith in a 10-year-old's voice, such certainty that the grown-ups would keep their promises. She kissed the top of Beth's head, breathed in the scent of her hair. Take care of your brothers. I always do. The ride to town took 3 hours through snow that hadn't seen a plow. Inside, Ezra Morrison looked up from his ledger. Sarah, didn't expect to see you after that blow. Need supplies, she said, laying her purse on the counter. Flour, salt pork, barely enough coins. Ezra tallied. $4.17. She had 12 cents short. Sarah slipped off her wedding ring, set it beside the money. This covers it. Ezra weighed the band, then nodded. More than covers. Take what you need. She gathered the packages, lighter and heavier all at once. The ring was gone, traded for flour and the chance to keep going. The ride back to the Andersons passed in comfortable silence, the horses picking their way careful through the drifted snow. The sun was setting, painting the white world gold and rose when they crested the last hill and saw the homestead below. Lamplight spilled from the windows. Children's voices carried on the still air. Home. For now, at least. Sarah, Jacob said as they dismounted. I've been thinking. She looked at him, heart hammering sudden and hard. About what happens next, he continued. When spring comes full, and I could stay, if you wanted. Help with the planting, fix what needs fixing. Build on another room, maybe. He took off his hat, turned it in his hands. Wouldn't expect anything you weren't ready to give. Just partnership. 2 people working toward the same thing. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes, not from sadness, but from something too big to name. Hope, maybe. The possibility of not facing every crisis alone. The children barely know you. Children are quick to learn, if the teaching's good. It's a hard life out here. Hard life anywhere, without the right person to share it. She thought of James, how he dreamed of building something lasting on this harsh land. How the dream had outlasted the dreamer, kept her going through seasons of doubt and difficulty. Maybe dreams were meant to be shared. Spring's still a long way off, she said. Jacob smiled, settled his hat back on his head. Good thing I'm patient. From inside the Anderson house came the sound of children laughing. Beth's voice rising above the others, bright with joy. Sarah touched the place where her wedding ring used to be, found only the memory of weight and obligation. Tomorrow they would go home to the soddy with its new roof beam, solid and strong. Tomorrow they would begin whatever came next. But tonight, in the golden spill of lamplight and the music of children's voices, the future felt possible again. Spring came late that year, snow lingering in the shaded, draws well into April. But when it came with a rush grass greening overnight, wildflowers painting the prairie in swaths of blue and gold, the air soft with warmth and promise. Jacob had stayed, as he'd said he would. Through the long tail of winter, he'd made himself useful mending harness, carving furniture, teaching Tommy and Sam to whittle. The children had taken to him gradual but sure, the way prairie plants take root in hard ground, slow at first, then deep and lasting. Now the soddy boasted a new room on the south side. Windows that caught the morning light, space for a proper table, and chairs Jacob had built with his own hands. The roof held steady against spring storms, the sound of it no longer a threat but a promise. Sarah stood in the doorway, watching her children play in the yard. Beth pushed the twins on a swing. Jacob had hung from the one cottonwood tree, their laughter bright as water over stones. The carved horse Tommy clutched had worn smooth from handling, loved near to pieces. Looks good, Jacob said, coming up behind her. He smelled of sawdust and sweat, honest work smells that had become familiar as her own heartbeat. It does. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the children, the rebuilt homestead, the wide prairie stretching green to the horizon. So much the same as when James had brought her here, but different too, tempered by loss, strengthened by choice. Got something for you, Jacob said, reaching into his pocket. Sarah turned, curious, and saw him holding a small wooden box carved from the same oak as the roof beam, sanded smooth as silk. On the lid, a simple design. 3 children standing beside a house. A woman in the doorway. Sun rising over prairie grass. It's beautiful. Open it. Inside, on a bed of blue velvet, lay her wedding ring, the thin gold band she'd traded for flour and survival. But beside it sat another ring, newer, wider, carved from pale wood. Ezra held onto yours, Jacob said. Figured you might want it back someday. The other one. He lifted the wooden ring, held it up to catch the light. Made it myself. From the old roof beam, the one that held as long as it could, then made way for something stronger. Sarah took the wooden ring, felt its smooth weight in her palm. Such careful work, the grain following the curve, the surface polished to reveal every whorl and line. A promise carved from the bones of her old life, shaped into something new. Sarah Mott, Jacob said, formal as a prayer. Would you consider taking my name? Sharing whatever comes next? She slipped the wooden ring onto her finger, felt how it settled there, lighter than gold, but somehow more substantial. A choice freely made, not of the thought scraped raw, like rope against skin, but a gift. I believe I would, Jacob Thorne. He kissed her then, soft and sure, while the children played in the yard and the prairie grass whispered secrets to the wind. The soddy stood solid behind them, its roof beam singing strong and true, ready for whatever storms might come. That evening, as the sun set gold over the endless grass, Sarah sat at her new table with pen and paper, writing the letter she'd never thought to write. Dear Charles, she began, the children are well and growing strong in this wide place. We are building something here, not just walls and roof, but something deeper, something that will last. I hope you understand why we choose to stay. She sealed the letter, set it beside the door to mail tomorrow. Outside, night settled gentle over the prairie, stars coming out one by one in the vast dark sky. Inside, lamplight pushed back shadows, and the sound of the roof beam song was the sound of home itself, built to last, built to weather any storm. If something in this story touched you, linger with us. We'll handle the rest.